Good morning. I'll welcome everybody to our February meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. Do we have any citizens to be heard this morning? If not, then I would ask the trustees if they have any changes or additions to our minute of our board meeting of January 10th and our special board meeting of January 24th. If not, I'd have a motion to approve both of those minutes.
Move approval.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Consent docket. We're going to have to kind of drag this meeting out a little. It's kind of a short docket. Short. No. The consent docket, are there any items on there any of the trustees would like individual discussion about? Anything you'd like to say, Jason, on the consent docket? Or?
Sure, just maybe a quick reminder, item G in particular, approval of a second amendment to the donation agreement with Hobby Lobby. Just to mention there that the amendment, as you noticed in your packet, is simply an extension of the time. We're still currently negotiating with the owner of the property and looking forward to resolving that transaction as quickly as we can, but we're extending the agreement for another 90 days.
But the idea to continue our transfer station is still...
Yes, that is our goal, is to try to continue to move that project along.
Okay, thank you. All right, do I hear a motion to approve our consent docket?
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We have two items for individual consideration. One is a resolution authorizing the administrator to establish sponsored streetcar service rates, estimated revenue of $6,800. So, Jason, if you'd like to kind of explain that.
Yeah, so as you know, with our transit operations, we're always looking for opportunities to diversify our revenue, generate operating revenue to offset the cost of providing the service. And one of the things that we as staff looked at is the ability to give businesses the opportunity to sponsor the streetcar service for, say, a day. You know, I mean, ultimately, we would love to work towards a long-term naming rights sponsorship, but, you know, until that comes to fruition, again, trying to maximize sponsorship and advertising dollars, we can set up a program where, say, for example, a business has a special event or maybe there's a new business opening, and they want to provide free streetcar transportation for that event, then basically they can sponsor the system for the day. Customers, passengers, they ride the streetcar for free, and then the revenue that is charged to that business doing the sponsorship is basically an average of what we collect through the fare box in a given day. And so we have like some proposed rates down there for sponsorship that the trustees could look at there in your memo. But essentially what we're proposing, and again, not necessarily for approval, we're asking the trust to approve the administrator developing those sponsorship rates. But what we're looking at initially is $1,700 for a day, Monday through Friday and on Sundays, and then Saturday, you know, one of our best ridership day, sponsorship for that day would be $5,000.
All right. But you have developed, and I ask you, that have developed rates where you could sponsor, you know, if you wanted to have a 2 or 3 hour for your company and go to lunch or something.
Right, and right, with the approval, I believe it was last month, the trustees approved our charter program for our streetcar. And interestingly enough, talking with staff just yesterday, I learned of a couple of possibilities that are out there of people already interested in chartering a streetcar. So hopefully that'll catch on. And again, generating revenue for the system to try to offset some of those operating costs.
Well, I may be this summer, since I did the river cruise for all my staff, I might want to do.
We need to get you on the reservation list.
Okay. All right.
We can help you with that.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions? Then I have a motion to approve item A.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item B is a change order and Amendment 1 to Convention Center parking garage. And I can't believe that we're finally getting a change order. I thought we would have had 2 or 3 by now, but no.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things we try to manage to a minimum, but we can never guarantee we won't have them. In fact, we have Corey Hubert, our parking manager, here to talk a little bit about this change order and some other change, at least one other change order that's in the works.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. This change order adds some steel supports for the brick veneer. We also increased the height of the elevator cab and then the walls in the elevator shafts, and then some concrete on the staircases. This change order and the amendment total $181,000+ and adds 1 day to the substantial completion. There is another change order coming along, and that's will be next month, relating to the delay, where substantial completion is going to be extended to October 30th, 2020, with final completion in December. Is there any questions?
Okay. Any questions?
I might just clarify, so for delay, we haven't experienced a delay, say, in the construction since the construction started. The delay was really more in postponing our ability to start construction because we had to prepare the site.
Correct.
So,
Correct. Sorry about that.
Just to make sure the trustees are aware that since we began construction, we have really maintained schedule.
Haven't had any weather delays because we had a lot of rain and
Well, we scheduled for some weather delays, but yes, there's two weather delays.
so occupancy is when?
Substantial completion is scheduled for October 30th, 2020. Final completion would be in December.
And when is the hotel and convention center scheduled to be completed?
The hotel will be completed the first of the year of 2021. The convention center is still on schedule, I think, for late September.
Of 2021?
Of 2020.
Oh, 2020, okay.
And with substantial completion, we do believe we can use the facility at substantial completion.
Correct.
Which is our October-November timeframe.
Okay.
Would the difference between substantial completion and full completion relate to the mechanicals, like the...
It's just a punch list.
Yep.
Yeah.
Punch list items and then getting that final certificate of occupancy at the end of the project.
They'll get a temporary
We'll get a temporary
certificate at the substantial completion portion.
And then-
But there'll be a few things like, we want you to paint this railing, we want you to, change out the elevator control board or whatever, but there'll just be a few things left at the end.
But cars could begin to park as soon as the convention center is open.
Yes.
Well, as soon as the substantial completion. If the convention center opens by the end of September and the garage doesn't have a substantial completion until the end of October, there could be a month difference in the time there.
All right, Corey, thank you. I have a motion to approve item B.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, next item is our ratification of claims and payroll for January 7th through January 28th. Unless there's any questions by any of the trustees, I'd have a motion to ratify.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, our financial reports. We've got a 6-month report on our employee retirement trust and the budget to actual for Cotpa. So, and I think Jason had just a brief comment on the retirement trust.
Right. So just a couple of comments on the retirement trust financial. Keep in mind, this is the financial for the 6 months ending December 31st. This is provided to the trustees usually twice a year. So just as a reminder, direct your attention to page 1, and this is the management's discussion and analysis piece. And just really directing you to a couple of the bullets under the financial summary. I want to mention that the net position for the pension is basically $14.5 million, an increase of $2.3 million from December 31st of 2018. And then directing your attention to the last bullet there, this is the one regarding the funding ratio. And you can see that at the July 1st, 2019, basically the end of the last fiscal year, start of this fiscal year, the funding ratio was at 84.46 compared to 84.25 the previous year. So our funding ratio has maintained, and we as the pension committee are always thinking about, of course, increasing that funding ratio, but also understanding, the trustees' desire to essentially make sure it's at least 80% or more. So we continue to work towards that. The other thing I would direct your attention to is the asset allocation. You can find that on page 10, and that's just really a breakdown there of what our current asset allocation is compared to our target. And you can see that our current asset allocation is within those target ranges established by our investment policy. And then the last piece of information I was going to share with you is just to give you a sense of the number of active members in our pension. And as of 2019, we had 272 active members. I would expect to see a considerable increase in active members when you think about all the staff that we've added this year with the Norman operations and just continuing to hire and fill vacancies.
Refresh my memory. It seems like a few years ago that we revised the benefit. Am I remembering anything correctly on that?
We have. I believe we've maybe done that over the last, I think there's been at least a couple times in recent history where we may have increased the benefit multiplier for the pension. And we've been able to do that really in cooperation, in collaboration with the ATU. 1 year, I believe we were able to do that, and at the same time transition over to the city's health insurance plan, which created some savings, which allowed us to put some funding in the pension, improve the funding ratio, and still be able to increase the benefit multiplier. And then I believe there was also a negotiations where we increased the benefit multiplier, and the Cotpa Trust picked up a portion of that additional cost, and then the members picked up an additional part of that cost so that we could increase that multiplier without negatively affecting the funding ratio. So yes, there has been a couple of times we've done that.
Has most of that come about because of the union negotiations, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Okay. I mean, that and the work that the pension committee does. Yep.
Okay. Any questions? Then I'd have a motion to approve the financial statement for the retirement. All in favor? Opposed? And then receive our budget to actual for the 6 months ended December 31st on the trust.
I have just a few comments then on the budget to actuals, and would direct the trustees' attention to page 2. This is our Transportation Operations Division. And I know my comment here is repetitive from previous months, but the most significant outlier we have in looking at any of our budget to actual line items, revenues, or expenses is that federal grant revenue line. I've mentioned in the past, and will just continue to remind the trustees, that we are under budget in terms of the amount of revenue we had expected to receive reimbursed from our federal grants through 6 months of the fiscal year, and this is all due to the timing of receiving our next formula grant. I believe last month I was optimistic and mentioned that we hope to have the grant in January and be able to draw against that grant in January. That did not come to fruition. However, I am pleased to report that we received the grant for February, so we now have that formula grant. I've already spoke with staff about actually doing 2 draws, 2 reimbursement requests in the month of February to get basically caught up on those reimbursements. And so where you see that federal grant revenue line right now through 6 months of the fiscal year being $1.2 million under what we had expected, by the end of February, we expect to pretty much close that gap. We expect to be even in February. Now, you're not going to see that until the April trust meeting when we review the February financials, but I do intend to speak on that during the March meeting and let you know exactly where we stand at that time. So other than that, looking down at the expenditure line, you can see that all of the expenditure categories are under budget, so we're spending less than what we had budgeted through 6 months of the fiscal year, and this is particularly helpful considering our reimbursement revenue is also under budget. Operating, directing your attention to the last line there on the financial, the operating loss, we basically spent $1.8 million more in this fiscal year than what we have had come in revenues. But again, thinking about getting that federal grant reimbursement revenue and the additional funding from the state should put us back to in the black, if you will, on that particular line. So on the next page, this is a Embark Norman financial. This is the first time we've included it in your packet. This is a work in progress in terms of, what level of detail we'll include in the packet. I've already received one suggestion on the revenues to break that payment from Norman revenue line into basically the payment we receive from Norman for reimbursement of expenses, and then the portion of that payment that is allocated to our 11% administrative costs. So we'll look at doing that hopefully in future months. But what you see here through 6 months ending December 31st, and keep in mind we actually started the service in August, you can see that we've received $537,000 in revenue, or we've invoiced for $537,000 in revenue compared to $575,000 in expenditures. And again, the variance that you see there is simply timing. We invoice once a month, but we continue to have expenses throughout the month. So that's why you see a variance there. Looking on page 4, this is our parking operations. Again, keeping my comments high level, but again, reminding the trustees that looking at revenues, monthly contract revenue is now about $129,000 under what we had projected through 6 months of the fiscal year. And again, if we continue on this trend, we're going to increase that variance probably by about $20,000 each month. So until we can get some more contract parkers in the system, that number is going to continue to grow as we go throughout the fiscal year. Again, fortunately, we've had our transient revenue come in over budget, so that's helped offset some of that decline on monthly contracts. Overall, year-to-date, our total revenue is $177,000 less than budgeted. It's still just over $3 million through 6 months of the fiscal year. Directing your attention to the expenditures, you can see that our expenditures are just under $1.6 million in total, again, with each expenditure category coming in under budget. And then a different picture here on the operating income than we looked at on the transit side. Here we're to the good, $1.4 million. So through 6 months of the fiscal year, we've generated $1.4 million more than what we've had in expenses and debt service. And then I will direct your attention, if I could, wrapping.
Debt service doesn't take into account defeasing the bond issues yet.
Yeah, yes, so the debt service that we have budgeted now and that we're paying reflects all of the issuing costs and our regular debt service for the 2019 bonds that we just issued. Yep, it's all reflected in there now.
Okay.
And again, generated considerable savings for us on our annual debt service by doing that. And then on page 7 on your financials, just a couple of comments on our streetcar operations. Directing your attention to the revenues, you can see that we're about 88% of what we had projected through 6 months of the fiscal year. We've received $2.8 million total in revenue. Most of that, of course, is from the general fund subsidy. But I think really the most relevant item to mention here is under the expenditures, and that's going to be that streetcar operations line. And as I've mentioned before, this is the budget line where we reflect our contract with Herzog Transit Services. You can see that we really only we've only paid $690,000 on that contract through 6 months of the fiscal year. I believe I had mentioned this probably in previous months that we were still reviewing some of the monthly invoices, negotiating on a couple of items. I'm pleased to report that although it's not reflected in this financial, all of those outstanding issues have been resolved, and within the last 2 to 3 weeks, we've actually paid 4 months' worth of those invoices. So where you see streetcar operations being, less than half of the budget in December, by the time you look at the financial updated through February, you're going to see that pretty much right on track with, or actually potentially over on budget. And so that's something that we'll just continue to look at, and I think we're processing those invoices a little bit faster than what we were at the start of the fiscal year. Glad to answer any questions.
On the parking report, the other services and fees is at 40% of expenses budgeted. Why is that so different?
Yeah, so the other
Is that
service...
timing?
No, well, the other services and fees is one of those categories where we typically come in considerably under budget. No, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong line. So the other services and fees, you're looking at the 90...
In parking.
Hold on,
page 4.
we're getting there.
I'm sorry.
My bad. Yes, I'm sorry, yes. Other service and fees. This is one where we typically finish considerably under budget.
Okay.
This is where we create a budget for professional services and studies, those kinds of things that we really, quite frankly, a lot of times don't know exactly what those are going to be, but we just know historically we have expenses in that category. So we try to have plenty of budget there so we have the authority to do those studies and those audits and those plans when they come up. And it just kind of varies from year to year, but we do typically finish considerably under budget, so that is not so much of an outlier or a surprise. To give you an example, the Kimley Horn study that we're doing, the downtown parking study, that is where, that type of study would be budgeted. The audit that we do every other year, the independent audit, where in this case we hired Walker Consulting to come in and do that audit for us, that type of audit would be budgeted in that line. So,
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I have a motion to approve our 6-month budget to actual.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, our program reports. The first is our streetcar report. Morning, Jesse.
Morning. How's everyone?
Good.
Morning to the board. Paint a picture of our week, our lovely snow day that we had. Just like to report that the streetcar operated without any issues, full service all day. Our maintenance team did a great job of clearing the snow from the streetcar tracks and the platforms. And this was just an awesome picture that I wanted to share. So I'll jump into our board report. So Okc Streetcar Embark, Mr. Fairbrush, and the OTA, the Oklahoma Transit Association, hosted State House Representative Marilyn Stark. And so essentially Jason and group took her throughout the different modes of transportation that we offer, showing her the ins and outs of public transit in Oklahoma City. This is all part of our working with the OTA to work with legislators to introduce them to the ins and outs of public transit, right? And so moving on, so Okc Streetcar and Embark are involved in the Oklahoma Mobility Plan with ODOT. So essentially what this plan does is it helps establish protocols and standards and also policies for transportation issues that we face today and possibly in the future. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're helping OTA get this survey out. So you can go to the link there, the oktransitplan.org survey, and we're also helping promote that at the transit center and on board the streetcars. And so essentially you go and fill out this survey, and it will help guide the development of that Oklahoma Mobility Plan. Visit OKC released its Exploring OKC by Streetcar Guide. You can see that online through the Visit OKC website and also on social media. So essentially, shows you how to explore all the Love the Loop partners on the streetcar line. And then also kind of along with that, Travel Oklahoma released its article on how to use the streetcar to visit all the different businesses and associations along the streetcar line. So these are great. We love seeing these things. Keeping up with our Arts Move events, we had singer-songwriter Wood Willow Music performing on the streetcar during our lunch hour in January. If you haven't had a chance to experience this live music, I encourage everyone to get out and take a look at it and take a listen. It's pretty awesome. We love doing this stuff. And then also, we continue our partnership with I-8 Oklahoma. So Café de Brazil was this past month's sponsorship, right? So I-8 Oklahoma goes and enjoys all the different dishes at different restaurants. Café de Brazil has a lovely, lovely menu, so be sure to check it out. And then, as always, we have our Love the Loop, and this past month we introduced 405 Yoga and Packards, so I'll take a chance to share one of our videos. As always, Michael and his team do an incredible job. So I had the opportunity to follow along with Downtown OKC as a hosted Leadership Oklahoma Class 33 on board the streetcar. And so we got the group on board a private streetcar. We went around the loop, and Addison with Downtown OKC basically gave a tour of all the different amenities and the cool architecture features and the buildings downtown. It's a pretty awesome event. So one of the things that we actually got to experience was, while we were doing this tour, was a blockage by an emergency vehicle, right? So we were turned the corner on Broadway, and right there on 7th Street was an ambulance sitting on the tracks, right? And so we got to experience that and, show what happens whenever we're blocked. And so we were actually blocked for between 8 to 10 minutes, waiting for the emergency vehicle to leave. And so one of the things that spurred was we fired back up our Fire and Life Safety and Security Committee. And so we called the police and fire and IMSA and our security team. We all got in a room together, and we talked about these blockages that we're seeing with emergency vehicles and how we can do better to get the emergency vehicles off the track so we can maintain service. And since that meeting, we've saw a great response in communication. So one of the things that happened actually the night after that meeting was fire trucks had to come to 10th Street, and they actually called us on the way to respond to that emergency to let us know that they were going to be right next to the tracks. They showed up, and within 6 minutes they were off the tracks, right? So it's all about that communication and keeping that communication going, and so we're going to keep that committee going and making sure that we're all communicating because we all have to share the road downtown, and we want to be able to maintain service and keep things rolling. talk about a little bit about ridership. So I want to kind of talk you through this graph because with us starting in December of 2018, operating all the way through 2019, and now we're into 2020. So you can see on the far right, the white bar graph there, that's December of 2018. And then you can also see the comparison of December of 2018 and December of 2019. And then if you look all the way to the far left of the graph, you can see January of 2019 and then January of 2020, right? So we'll focus on January, comparison there. So in January of 2019, we saw our ridership at 48,000, and then January of 2020, our ridership was just a little over 23,000, nearly 24,000. So in a comparison, right, so January of 2019, we were fresh, we just opened, we were free at the time. 2020, this was anticipated, right, so we saw a slight dip in ridership in January. This all goes back to the whole idea of if people are on the sidewalk, people are using streetcar to get around, those types of things. It's been cold in January. People don't even come outside. They stay inside the building, not necessarily looking to be outside, right? But that said, nearly 24,000 riders in January. We consider that a success, and we look to continue to improve our ridership, and we'll be back next month to see what February looks like. So this is our ridership for the entire month of January. Again, you can see kind of the waves, right? So Monday starts off slow, and then you peak to Saturday, and then dips back down a little bit on Sunday. One thing I do want to point out is the first Saturday in January, so it's a pretty awesome day for us, nearly 2,800 riders. If you look at 2019, January 5th, right, was one of our biggest ridership days of all of 2019. I think we saw nearly 6,000 riders. Haven't been able to figure out why that first Saturday in January sees such a bump, but it's definitely something I'm interested in checking out. So our total ridership, again, for the entire month, 23,000, nearly 24,000. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions? All right, thank you, Jesse. Parking system report.
It's going to be fairly brief, just a few pictures of our new garage that we're building. Here's our storm, our storm scepter, fancy term for the device that cleans all the oil and waste from the rainwater in the garage. Pour of, on the west side of the lot, our ground floor. We're working on a raised floor right here. You can see the there's a beam in the middle of the picture, the deeper part of the rebar. Another prep for a pour above ground. The entire length of the garage on the southern raised floor. Parking equipment loops, that's what activates the parking equipment. If you can see the circular conduits. Another pour at night. Dry concrete, we're walking above the ground. And then the overall site, you can see that we're quite a bit above ground now. That's all I have.
Okay.
Any questions?
One, have we completed the first floor? I mean, what floor are we on at this point?
We're still on the first floor. We're above ground. We haven't finished pouring slab on grade.
Councilman, I might add that I did text the MAPS program manager, so the substantial completion of the convention center is scheduled for late September, but I don't think they have any events scheduled in there till after the first of the year. So I think that the garage completion will coincide very well with the actual use of the convention center.
Yeah. Although some people postpone organizing events, I mean, scheduling events, and you might see some late events
I think for the convention center, Mike Carrier's been actively marketing that, and I think that they usually, the size of those events usually book out years in advance, so I think he's...
I'm talking about small local
Right.
organizations, just looking at small.
Right, right.
Is there a surface parking lot being built with the convention center on the south side of it?
500 space lot on the south side.
So that'll be completed and available by the...
Right.
opening of the
Yeah,
convention center.
and although it's not direct, right next to the convention center, we still have the Cox garage as well.
All right. Thank you. Mobility management report. We do not have a marketing and technology report today, so we've got mobility management.
Good morning. How's everybody today? I got to tell you that I do not have a snow picture for you because senior transportation doesn't run in the snow. They don't like to go outside, so we don't run when it's snowy, so there's nothing to take a picture of. And it's good to be here. It's been a while since I've been here. I apologize for missing my last rotation, but as Jesse said, we are working with the OTA on the public transit policy plan, and I was attending a meeting for Jason so that he could be here with you. So for our senior transportation, these numbers that I'm getting you right now are for Oklahoma County. So far this year, we've had total trips of 18,000, almost 18,500. We're seeing a little decrease in this. It's kind of expected with senior transportation. It does fluctuate from year to year and month to month, and oftentimes day to day. One of the big things that has seen a drop in this is the meal sites. The Oklahoma County Senior Nutrition runs those sites. They obviously pick the locations, and they make the determinations when they're going to merge those sites together. So they have done that, and we've seen some drops in the meal sites. But interestingly, shopping and medical are going way up. So this does go back and forth all the time. Trending overall for the last 3 years, we're actually up almost 9,000 trips. So we've done some new outreach. We always enjoy doing these. This year so far we've gone to the Silver Senior Summer. We've been out to the Parks Department to Woodson Park. We had the health fair down at the Transit Center. And we've also worked with the Healthy Community Collaborative in Northeast Oklahoma City to hold an event out at the zoo. In December, our big focus, because obviously it's a holiday month and there's not a lot of outreach events that we can attend, our big focus in December has been a partnership with the Regional Food Bank. We've developed senior transportation postcards, and they are going to put those and insert them into the monthly food distribution boxes for the seniors that receive services in Oklahoma County, which is going to be really exciting. We're very proud of that one. For our homeless and low income, as a reminder, this is the Cdgb Funding. This program is going along, and we're working with 60 agencies. For those of you that like to do the math in your head, you'll notice that those emergency taxi rides seem to be a little bit lower than they have been in years past. The reason for that is the demand for that service is simply going down. The agencies are often transitioning to using those bus passes because they are more flexible. So we're seeing an increase in demand for the bus passes and a reduction for the taxi rides.
Marilyn,
yes,
do
ma'am.
you think that the decline in the emergency taxi rides coincides with our lengthened hours of service, the routes that we've expanded to night service?
It could very
And
well
we
be,
have-
because that's what a lot of these agencies support is commuters, people going back and forth to work and that type of thing, and accessing social services. And of course, they do a really good job in the scheduling and route development to make sure those social service agencies are on a fixed route. So I think that combined with that and the things that we're doing to improve our system overall is making it a more reliable way for them to use those. You all had asked last year about the agency application process for this program. I wanted to let you know that does start March 1st. We take applications once a year. We get a set budget for this. We evaluate the applications received in the order that they are received. figure out how much money we have available and how many bus passes we can provide to each agency based on their service load and the amount of participants they see in a given year. That process is going to start March 1st. I will make sure Trustee Cooper knows this because he's the one that asked me to make sure and mention this. They can either call 235-RIDE for an application, or they can email us at mobilitymanagement@okc.gov. And that process will start in March, and the allocations, letters, and awards go out in April. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our Embark Well program. And I also want to point out to you that you have a slight typo in your written board report that's in your packet. It says 626 trips, but it is actually 620. That was just a typo on that form. As you can see, it went way up in September 19th, and we saw a drop in October, November. Usually see with this population, as we go into the winter months, their ridership does decline, so we kind of expected that, and it's gone a little bit back up in January. Last year, when you all graciously gave us this budget to start this program, we started out with $4,600 set aside for transportation. I'm pleased to report that this program is going well, and the costs are significantly less than what we had projected. We had planned to spend about $3,000 a month on trips, and we're spending about $1,000, so that's very exciting. Our marketing budget for this has also come in under, so we think that we are going to have enough to carry this program through at this basic ridership level at about 125 trips a month, all the way through next fiscal year without any additional funding. This is another program that we partnered with the Regional Food Bank to promote this. This is also going into those food distribution boxes that we discussed that the seniors get once a month at their food distribution sites. Pete White is the most popular location by far. About 80% of our trips are going to Pete White right now. We've already heard from some seniors in far south Oklahoma City as soon as the word broke of where they were going to put the next MAPS 3 Wellness Center and whether or not we were going to add that route to it. We've also gotten some interest already from the northeast side with the people, making sure that that one is going to be added to this when the time comes. So we're excited about that. And as you know, just as a reminder, we are partnering with the Community Transportation Association of America and the Oklahoma Transit Association for the Arnold Transportation Innovation Grant. This is a 4-year project. We are currently in the month of February moving out of our limited launch phase and going into the full phase. This is working with staff at DHS and at NorthCare. NorthCare has a family tree program. That program is also partially funded by the Arnold Foundation, and so we are working together with them, with that group of people, to fully launch this program with an ultimate goal, obviously, of expanding it out to all of the DHS participants. So far, we've done 200 trips. There are about 60% of those are going with one of our on-demand service providers, and at about 30% of the time, 30 to 40% of the time, we are sending them a fixed route on a fixed route bus. Just depends on where they're going and what the time frame is for them to attend those events. Now, if you recall, this travel training program was a component of our Arnold grant submission. It's one of the things that we're providing to the participants because the goal in the Arnold program is to provide a holistic support system for the individuals trying to get their children back, which includes transportation, and obviously that component they need to understand how fixed route works, how to read a bus schedule, how to determine what bus stop to get on, what transfers to make. One of the exciting things about this is, if you'll recall, when we had the special transportation meeting talking about Embark Plus for the paratransit, and the capacity issues that we're having on Embark Plus, one of the goals of this Embark Explore Travel Training Program is to implement this with paratransit customers that may have the ability to use fixed route for some of their trips. However, they need training in how to do that. So we're really excited about how this is going to go forward in 2020. We're getting ready to start working with marketing on some branding, and we're going to flesh out the program in the next couple of months, and so we'll have a pretty exciting update for you at that time.
Marilyn, that was one of the things we had mentioned when we provided kind of a status of paratransit at a transportation committee earlier this year. We talked about the increasing demand we've seen in paratransit and what we could do to try to address that demand and And one of the things is this program.
Yeah, we're really excited about this, and we think that this, combined with some other initiatives that we're looking at regarding paratransit eligibility and the software that we use to schedule, between those three things, we think that we can really make some inroads to address those. So, as you may have heard, we were approached by the Area-Wide Aging Agency. Their former provider of transportation services for seniors in Canadian County did not renew their grant application. So seniors in Canadian County needing medical transportation had no way to do it. There was no provider unless they were qualified to use tribal transit that runs in that area. So they approached us. We thought it through, checked out the feasibility of it, and said, okay, we will give this one a shot and see if we can pull this off for you. So what we're doing in Canadian County, we're only focusing on the large cities right now because obviously it is a quite rural county, and it's going to take a little time for us to ramp up and get to the ability where we can provide all the trips needed. We launched it on January the 2nd. We have providers in place. As a reminder, this is a $60,000 a year grant. We're only doing it for half a year this year. We did some press releases, and we were really pleased. It's one of the best responses to a press release about mobility management services that we have ever had. Over the course of December 30th and 31st, it was on the television news, not the print news, the television news, 8 times. So I was very excited about that. That was very excited. It generated quite a bit of phone calls. We have signed up quite a bit of seniors. We have lots of trips scheduled for the remainder of this month, and even trips scheduled out into March. In January, we've done 16 trips so far, so it is obviously going to come up slow because they have been out without services for over 6 months, and it's going to take a while to get the word out. One of the things that we did do was develop a list of all the social areas, social groups that meet in Canadian County and the cities, also the larger churches that have senior programs, and we have sent out an informational letter announcing that we're doing senior transportation for medical trips in Canadian County and inviting them to call us if they have information or if they'd like us to come out to their church and do a presentation, which is a lot of the ways that we approach senior transportation is just going out and talking to small groups.
Asking for a friend, Marilyn. How old do you have to be to qualify as a senior?
For senior transportation, you have to be 60 and over.
Awesome.
I know. We're getting close.
That friend will
We're
be
getting
excited.
very close. But as always, we really appreciate all your support of our programs. While we don't always have our goal in mobility management to increase our ridership, our goal is to fill gaps and to improve the quality of life and the health outcomes of this population that really, really needs these services. One of the things that Jason wanted me to share with you regarding the Embark Well program was that we intend in June, at the end of this first pilot year, to do some surveys. We're actually going to partner with our transportation provider to do some case studies so that we can provide you some information on how this is actually improving health outcomes for those seniors that are using it regularly. So we're excited to bring that back to you as well. And that's all I have. If you have any questions.
No.
One comment I'd like to make regarding the funding for the Canadian County Senior Services, because we are obviously as a trust dependent on general fund subsidy for normal transit services. The services we're providing in Canadian County are funded essentially by area-wide aging grant and donations, right?
Correct. It's an area-wide agency. It's an Older Americans Act funding, so it is a federal grant program, and they administer it for this area.
Could you explain just in general, on the senior program where you'll provide transportation for medical purposes for meals as well as, what's the third item?
We do grocery shopping, weekly grocery shopping.
So is this a situation where you have a place where people would gather to pick them up, or do you pick them up at their homes?
It is door to door. We go to their residence. One of the ways that this is different than regular on-demand type services like an Uber and Lyft is it is route based. So you have to sign up in advance, and we create routes around those senior meal sites or the selected grocery store, and they are required to go to the one closest to their house, and that enables us to have one vehicle that goes and gets everybody on that day, drops them off the location, and then comes back at the appropriate time, picks them up, and takes them back home. And we can do a lot more trips with a lot less money doing it that way.
Sure. So in regards to the non-emergency medical treatment, Do you encourage them to go to certain
No, sir.
clinics?
No,
They
sir.
can go to any one?
They can go to any doctor that they have an appointment with. We do, especially in Canadian County, if they need to come to Oklahoma City to see a specialist, we need about 7 days' notice for that, just because of the trip length and the coordination that's required. In Oklahoma City, for non-emergency, we ask them to call us at least 3 days in advance. And of course, we don't do same-day need, although we have the ability, if we do run into an emergency situation, we have very limited funding and a very small number of trips available for those situations where if they find themselves in a very urgent situation and need to go somewhere very quickly.
Thank you.
Do they wait on them at the doctor's, or do they give a time frame they'll be back in an hour or whatever?
Most of those we do what we call a will call, and the participants take in for their appointment, and we just ask them, to tell your doctor that you've arranged for transportation, and if they could let you know when you've got about 30 minutes left before your appointment is finished, then they will just call us and we send the vehicle at that point. Sometimes they know, depending on where they're going, if they're just going to get a flu shot, that it's not going to be very long, and they may wait if it's not going to be more than a few minutes. If they need more assistance in that,
Doctors won't have to wait so long.
that we do have a program for seniors that need someone to stay with them throughout the doctor's appointment, but we refer them to the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, the Provider Ride Program, and they have senior volunteers that go with them and help them fill out paperwork and things like that.
And I can't remember if you did mention the transportation to the wellness centers.
Embark well?
Embark well, you did. But how's that? I think I saw the number in there. But
It's averaging between 80 to 120 trips a month. Our ultimate goal for our outreach in the remainder of this fiscal year and moving on through the end of 2020 is to get that number pretty steady, right around 125 to 140. With that level of ridership, we think that we can manage it as well as make the funding last all the way out through the end of next fiscal year.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, Marilyn? Thank you.
Thank you.
I've asked Jason to add one more thing to our program reports, and that's the Regional Transit Authority to give a report after, whenever they have their trust meeting, to give us an update after that. So we'll be adding that to our program report. All right. Any items from any of the trustees?
I've got a question. So, Jason, I was reading an article a few weeks ago about transportation available in Utah, specifically, I believe, Salt Lake, and how they have their public transportation has the ability to provide short-term, kind of unique transportation between various types of public transportation. For example, if someone took, because they've got a streetcar in Salt Lake City, and if they needed to get from there to where a bus route was, there's kind of a almost like a Uber situation, but it's more of a van type situation that they provide for in-between transportation. We don't have anything like that, do we?
We do not, but and I'm not familiar with that particular piece of the Salt Lake model, but it sounds a lot like what we're aspiring to do with our micro transit program, where you do provide that limited service to connect to the transit routes or lines.
And in that article, they compared the cost of the public in terms of fares to the people utilizing this, and it was less expensive than, say, Uber's shared ride program, where you may have another or two other people sharing an Uber. Fairly cost effective.
Yeah, it does sounds a lot like a micro transit program, and I would suspect they probably had a mobile app to schedule trips. So yeah, we're looking forward to pursuing that here, an option like that.
And that's probably kind of neat, because I've ridden the streetcar in Salt Lake City, and it's just a straight north-south route. I mean, it's just up and back, so. All right. Jason?
Just to add on to your comments about our reports moving forward, so in addition to bringing back some trustees information about progress with the RTA, I've talked with several trustees individually, and our rotation for program reports, what we're going to look at doing is trying to rotate Streetcar out from every month, now that we've been operating for over a year. And we'd like to introduce a couple of new reports for the trustees. One is being a safety report. As you know, we've got a lot of things we're working on in terms of not only improving and enhancing the safety of our system, but meeting federal guidelines related to safety, and in terms of implementing our public transit agency safety plan and standing up our safety management system. So we'd really like to be able to start providing some progress reports from our chief safety officer on that. And then secondly, again, providing some regular reports on community engagement. You guys y'all are familiar with Kristen Torkelson, our community engagement liaison. She's often at the forefront of events and contacts with businesses. And so just give you a sense of, the community engagement that we're doing on a regular basis.
Jason, could I ask a question? So could you give some thought to possibly identifying another city or two that is similar to Oklahoma City in terms of large, spread out, and what was done in those communities in an effort to increase public transportation usage? I would say a city like Houston, but their problem, with the traffic congestion, that problem by itself would encourage me to use public transportation in Houston. But I'm wondering if there's cities, that do not have the type of congestion that, say, a Houston has, that has used, whether it's micro public transportation or some other thing, to improve, and they've seen an improvement in public transportation.
Yeah, we'll be glad to do that, and as you suggested, maybe start with trying to identify a couple of cities that are similar to us, not only in land mass, but density. And then to your point on commute times, I know that information is readily available through, I believe it's a census, average commute times in various communities, so we could try to find some comparable commute times as well. And then certainly we'd like to follow up, make sure the cities we select, maybe the trustees feel are appropriate, and we're glad to pursue that. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Well, so I think congestion is often a big factor in encouraging people to use public transportation. And while sometimes I'm sure we all have felt, boy, this traffic around here is getting heavy or difficult to maneuver through, it still isn't anywhere like you see in some locations. And then I think one of the issues, like in a city like Salt Lake, given the environment it's in, air pollution is a factor pushing people towards public transportation more so than what we have here. And I know sometimes we have high levels of pollutants, but for the most part, it's not as bad as other areas in the country. So anyway, thank you.
Any other comments? If not, then we're adjourned. Oh,
I don't think we actually received the report.
Move to receive the reports.
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.